Hey, what's up everybody? We are back again, and today we are once again going to be talking about the man himself, Jumix. Now I already hear what you guys are going to say though. You've done multiple videos on him at this point, talking about his come up, how he got his fame, his record deal, his collective, and basically every other detail that has to do with his life. And on top of that, many other YouTubers have done videos on this topic before, and it seems like a pretty straightforward story. Just a kid who got a record deal at an early age, let all the fame go to his head, and completely destroyed everything that he had going for him. But while all of that is true, and Jumix is definitely a very egocentric person, leading him to look like the villain in almost every single situation, there are a couple details circulating around the story that still don't quite make sense. I mean, first of all, we have Jumix doxing all of his friends, which a lot of people don't really understand the motive behind. I mean, was Jumix really that egocentric that he would go out of his way to dox his friends who had really no fame at that point when he was at the top of his game? As well as the more vile accusations that would come out against Jumix later on, accusing him of talking to girls, which never really seemed to have a whole lot of conclusive evidence behind it. I mean, I'm not completely ruling it out of the question, but I never seen a single victim come forward and say that Jumix actually talked to them when they age. It could happen, but at this point it has been 6 months and nobody's come forward, so it seems like it might have been a rumor. But why did that rumor start in the first place? Well, let me tell you guys, I've been more invested in this story than any sane man should ever be, looking into it over the course of 4 years. Even before I was making YouTube videos, I wanted to get to the bottom of what really went down with Jumix. I was able to pull different details from the progress video, as well as talking to Jumix fans at the time, because that's right, Jumix actually used to have fans at one point, but I was never really able to get the full scope of the story until I started making these videos. And once I started doing that, all of a sudden a bunch of people started coming out of the woodwork that actually knew Jumix at the time, that knew different individuals connected to the story, and now I finally have the full thing, at least as good as we're gonna get. I mean, once again, nobody really wants to come forward and talk in these videos. They talk to me behind the scenes, so if any details do get mixed up, I do apologize. I'm only one man and I'm trying to connect a lot of different stuff into one cohesive story, so I'm gonna do my best with that. But before we really get into it, look at this video as entertainment. I'm not trying to slander anybody, I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything, I'm simply telling a story from the underground, so please take it as such, and without further ado, let's get into it. Now this story really begins in Chicago during 2017, around the later end of the SoundCloud scene, with our main character, Mark Kissinger, also known as Lil Jumix. Now Mark really isn't all that special of a kid, there's really nothing exceptional about him. Some people have told me that he grew up rich, other people told me that he grew up poor, but either way, he's just your average kid that nobody understands. And just like any other kid growing up in the late 2000s, he found himself heavily drawn to the SoundCloud wave of rap, with people like Smoke Perp and Lil Pump being the first ones to catch his attention with all their flashy jewelry, the money, and of course, well, being famous. But at the time, Jumix was really only a fan of the lifestyle and really had no interest in making hip-hop music himself, with him being more heavily invested in the punk genre of music, even having his own band at one point called No Signal, which eventually fell apart in his later teenage years. All of that would change once he discovered an artist known as Lil Peep. Now you guys need to realize how influential Lil Peep was at the time. I was actually in high school around the same time as Jumix, and after Peep passed away, every single somewhat emo kid, as well as even popular kids, wanted to be like Peep. Because basically everybody was able to relate to Peep in one way or another. After all, once again, Lil Peep really wasn't anything all that special growing up. He was an average kid who was able to make some pretty decent music, got swept up in the drug wave, and before long passed away at a tragically young age. And to a heavily depressed youth, that was a very sexy story. Passing away and having absolutely everybody love you, girls were falling in love with him, guys wanted to be him, and Jumix was no different. He wanted a piece of that pie. He wanted to be Lil Peep. So he started dropping music on SoundCloud under the new name of Lil Jumix, named after his favorite juice that he would drink as a kid, and of course he was making emo rap. In the course of about 2 years, he ended up dropping multiple projects, which of course didn't really pick up a lot of traction, as after all at that point SoundCloud was heavily oversaturated, as well as emo rap being pretty watered down with everybody new coming into the genre. But his music was able to catch the attention of at least one person, another small SoundCloud artist going by the name of Conundrum, who had his own group called Sad Boy Suffer. Now that's really the first misconception about the entire story of Jumix, is that Jumix was the one who started Sad Boy Suffer in the first place. He wasn't. It was actually Conundrum who came up with it. However, Conundrum was happy to bring Jumix and his other in real life friend Travis, also known as Love Burns, into the group, and together the two of them started making music, with Travis creating the merch. This went on throughout the course of 2017 into 2018 when Jumix pulled his infamous stunt where he smoked a blunt in his classroom, getting him expelled and getting him a little bit of attention online, being reposted on No Jumper. And this is where the second misconception comes in about the Jumix story. That video really didn't get him as much attention as he lets on. It only got him about 4,000 followers on Instagram. It was reposted on No Jumper and did get a little bit of attention on there, but overall it was basically a drop in the bucket and he wasn't famous overnight. This video was recorded in late 2017 and it would take until late 2018 for Jumix to finally get his deal with Cortan. Now what you need to understand about Cortan is that basically it was a vanity project. You take a bunch of super rich Australian investors who all had a hand in helping out Billie Eilish in her early career and tell them that they can't make the next big up and coming SoundCloud rapper, and they're gonna take you up on that bet. With them first setting their sights on another artist going by the name of Lil Soda Boy, who was already gaining quite a bit of attention in the LA scene, with a couple big uploads on the Astaria channel, with Helicopters being his biggest song, as well as him almost getting signed to Black Bear's label at one point before that fell apart. And with him already having that existing audience, he seemed like the perfect candidate. After all, his blow up would look very organic, it wouldn't seem like he was planted in the industry, and of course, any kid who was that age would want all the fame that they were willing to give him. But Lil Soda Boy was smarter than that, and he didn't want to sign away the rights to all his previous music, as well as letting his entire career be controlled by a bunch of executives, so he actually ended up saying no, leading them to have to focus their attention somewhere else. And that's when they discovered Jumix. Now some people say he got signed off of that video that he made in the classroom, where others say that he got signed because his parents already had money and they were able to connect him to Cortan, but either way, he ended up meeting up with them in LA and they ended up signing him right away. And at this point, you already know the story. He ended up getting set up with a bunch of big producers. I Love McConan ended up ghostwriting his first couple tracks. They shot some pretty professionally made music videos with Taco. And with that, the Jumix movement was off to a good start. He was ready to be the next big emo rapper to rival people like XXXTentacion and Lil Peep. Until, well, basically everybody ended up seeing through it. I mean, after all, the music video was way too well directed for an up-and-comer. It was being pushed into absolutely everybody's algorithm. It seemed like this kid came out of absolutely nowhere with a big team behind him, which at the time was a big no-no because after all, the entire SoundCloud wave was basically built off of kids making music in their bedroom, shooting music videos in their own backyards, doing little warehouse shows all over their own city before then blowing up and making it big. And Jumix had none of that. He had no backstory, nobody knew where he came from, it seemed like he popped up out of nowhere, and because of that, nobody really fucked with him, except, of course, younger kids. Because while all the older people that were around 18 to 21 and really grew up with the SoundCloud wave from the early years were making fun of him, the younger kids who are only just coming into the genre really fuck with them. And because of that, Jumix was actually able to gather a small fan base, with him talking to multiple of his fans on Snapchat on the daily. And to be fair with you, I know that does sound a little bit weird. After all, I just said that a lot of Jumix's fans were around 14 years old at the time, and Jumix was 19, but he was really only talking to them about music, and after all, if that's what his fan base was, that was the fan base that he was going to have to go with. And with all this newfound fame, as well as a bunch of young artists who wanted to work with him, he thought it was a good idea for him to start to expand Sad Boy Suffer by adding more artists to it. Eventually, he'd start to bring in people like Romance Planet, Scars, Sad C-Rod, and of course, Kill Gil. But Kill Gil wouldn't come into the story until a little bit later on. Right now, he was mostly rocking with I Don't Know Conundrum, Travis Loveburns, and Sad C-Rod, who of course was a 15-year-old boy. And together, all of them would start to stream Fortnite on Twitch, which eventually caught the attention of another underground artist going by the name of Lil Saku. And this is where everything really started to fall apart. Now, at this point in time, it is possible that you've heard of Lil Saku before. I mean, she's not a big artist by any means, but she definitely has gained quite a bit of infamy in the underground scene at this point. But during the time in 2018, basically nobody knew who she was. Or at least that would be the case if you only knew her by her artist name, Lil Saku. But if you're unlucky enough to know her by her real name, Becca Knight, then you were definitely aware that the rabbit hole went a whole lot deeper. Because Becca had become somewhat infamous in a very niche genre of underground Canadian rock, with her being known as an orbiter of multiple bands, with some accounts of her even stalking certain members, with her eventually being barred off from going to shows, as well as eventually being kicked out of the entire genre after some accusations came out that she was talking to underage boys on both Facebook as well as in real life. Now, if you want to know more about those accusations, I actually made a couple videos on her in the past where I went deeper into that, but for this video, I don't really want to talk too much about it. I only really want to talk about the ramifications of those accusations coming out, and that was her getting kicked out of the genre. So at this point, what was Becca supposed to do? All her friends and collaborators had basically cut her off, her reputation online had definitely been smeared, and everybody in the community knew what she was up to. But you gotta keep in mind this was a very small community that was mostly comprised of in real life people, so the word probably would have never spread to the broader internet if she was smart enough to log off, go and get some mental health before then reintegrating into society, living living a low-key life where nobody would ever bother her about her previous actions again. But of course, Becca wouldn't do that because she still wanted to be famous. She still wanted to make music and she still wanted to be online. So at this point, she had to change genres, and there was no better place to go than to SoundCloud rap. Because just like Jumix before her, she was also a massive fan of Lil Peep and wanted to start emulating all the music that he was making, although let's be honest, both of these people became fans of Lil Peep after he passed away. They weren't listening to the music beforehand. Sometimes I think it's a good thing that Peep's not here to see the impact that he made on the world, because I definitely think he'd be spinning in his grave if he saw these two people, but anyways, I digress. Now, Lil Saku's career after becoming an emo rapper really isn't all that eventful. She ended up dropping a bunch of music on SoundCloud that never really went anywhere. She collaborated with a bunch of small artists. Apparently at one point she met Hella Sketchy, although nobody really knows what that connection really was. She ended up tattooing her face, dyeing her hair pink, and a lot of people think that she got a nose job, but it turns out that she didn't, and she just heavily facetunes a lot of her pictures on Instagram to give the impression that her nose is a lot smaller than it actually is. Now, if you guys just think I'm randomly making fun of a woman's appearance out of nowhere, that's actually not the case, because her big nose does come back into the story a little bit later on in a really weird way, so that detail actually is important. Anyways, fast forward a couple years and Jumix is playing Fortnite on livestream with all of his boys, and Lil Saku somehow becomes aware of it. And the minute that she tunes in and sees Jumix, she instantly falls in love. She wants to be around him, she wants to be his friend, and of course she wants to date him. Now keep in mind, she was a 27-year-old woman at this point and Jumix was only 19. Now of course that's not illegal, but it definitely is kind of weird. But either way, Saku finds a way. Apparently some of Jumix's friends find her attractive, so she's able to get on the stream, and the two of them quickly become friends and start screaming Fortnite multiple days of the week. But Jumix is definitely not feeling her in that type of way. I mean, after all, he already has a girlfriend, he's making his money, he's playing his Fortnite, and he really has no time to entertain these hoes. But Saku is not going to take no as an answer, and Jumix having a girlfriend only turns her on more, because apparently she has some sort of weird fetish for going after guys that already have girlfriends. So if she wasn't bad enough, that's just another fun fact to make you like her even more. But once again, Jumix has absolutely no interest in her whatsoever. He already has his girlfriend, and at this point he's starting to get addicted to drugs like Xanax, so he really doesn't have a whole lot of interest in hooking up with anybody altogether. So what does Saku do? She starts going after his friends. Apparently she ended up hooking up with Romance Planet or sending him some pictures. I'm not really sure what the details are of that, and I'm sure Romance Planet would never talk about it, but either way, something definitely went down there. This led to an altercation between Jumix and Romance Planet where they were both in the studio together. Apparently Romance Planet got mad at Jumix and ended up taking a shit on the top of his toilet. Yes, that's really what apparently went down, although that is Jumix's side of the story and Romance Planet has never spoken on it. But no matter what the true story behind those events might be, Jumix and Romance Planet would never be friends again, and Jumix had officially lost a collaborator of no fault of his own. Well, at least that's what we think. But either way, with Romance Planet out of the picture, Jumix had to bring somebody in to replace him, and that's when he ended up recruiting the artist Kill Gil to be a member of Sad Boy Suffer. But there was a problem with Kill Gil, and what was that? Well, he was actually extremely talented and was gaining a fan base all on his own. And you're probably thinking, what's the problem with that? Isn't it a good thing that Kill Gil is talented and he's gaining them an entirely new fan base that they never had before? Well, in most cases, yes, but you gotta keep in mind who we're talking about here. No matter what way you spin it, Jumix definitely has a massive ego, and he couldn't stand another artist in his own collective outshining him, so he had no choice but to cut him off and kick him out of the group. And of course this leads to all the other members of Sad Boy Suffer starting to look at Jumix in an entirely different light. It seems like fame has really gone to his head, and with all the drug use, he's definitely acting like a completely different person. Not to mention Lil Saku already has an entire hate campaign warring against him, so they decide to go talk to her and see what really went down between the two of them, with her completely lying about the situation and eventually seducing Sad C-Rod. Now keep in mind, Jumix was 19 at the time. Pretty weird for her to be attracted to him, but at least it was legal, as well as Romance Planet I think being 18 years old, so he was technically legal, but Sad C-Rod was 15 years old. And of course being 15 years old, he's gonna want to talk to the pretty SoundCloud lady, and before long she ended up sending him a picture of her boobs, and of course that completely set Jumix off. At this point he was completely paranoid. He felt like everybody was turning against him, everybody was out to get him, the entire internet was making fun of him for being an industry plant, and at this point he cracked. He ended up kicking out absolutely everybody in Sad Boy Suffer, even though, like I previously mentioned, the group was actually owned by I Don't Know Conundrum, so he didn't have the right to do that in the first place. But he would even take it to the next level by hacking into his friend Travis's Instagram account that was running the Sad Boy Suffer clothing brand, changing the name to Love Burns, as well as changing all the passwords so Travis couldn't get back onto it. And on top of that, he ended up copywriting the Sad Boy Suffer tag that was used in most of I Don't Know Conundrum's songs, even though I Don't Know Conundrum was the one who made that tag in the first place. But either way, all of his music ended up getting taken off of YouTube. Now at this point, if you followed the story at all before, you already know what's going to happen next. Jumix is going to end up doxing both I Don't Know Conundrum and Sad C-Rod on his Snapchat, but what a lot of people don't realize is that that didn't immediately take place after he copyrighted their songs. I know if you ever watched the progress video, you probably get the impression that that happened, but the one thing you gotta look at is him talking on his live stream. Because if you look up in the corner, you realize that he's not streaming on his Jumix account. He's instead streaming on another account going under the name of Goodnight Mark, and in fact, he actually ended up dropping a lot of music under that alias as well. But why? Why would Jumix randomly change his name at the height of his fame? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? A lot of people believe that he changed his name after he ended up doxing his friends to try to get away from that controversy, but you can see right here, he was already going under that name before he even ended up doxing them. So there must be another reason that he decided to change his alias. Well, there is. And that's this infamous clip right here where Jumix is seen on a Fortnite live stream completely high out of his mind on Xanax, where he says the line, "I want to date 9-year-olds."
Standing in a f***ing bush.
Bro, I wish I could date 9-year-olds.
Now for about a year now, people have wondered where this clip ended up coming from. Why would he say something like that on a live stream, and who recorded it? Well, listen to it very closely.
It's just standing in a f***ing bush.
Bro, I wish I could date 9-year-olds.
Whose other voice do you hear on there? A girl's voice. Yep, that's right guys. Lil Saku is actually the one who ended up recording that clip herself, and she basically kept it around for the moment that she could strike Jumix and destroy his reputation. And of course, at this point, a lot of people already didn't like Jumix. So much to the point that there was already an Instagram page going by the name of Exposing Jumix, talking about him stealing the clothing brand, him copywriting all the songs. So of course, when somebody came to them and told him that he might be a as well, they immediately ran with that, with them sending all of their followers to immediately comment on all of Jumix's posts, calling him out for being a pedophile. And of course, at that point, people in the broader audience started to notice as well, and everybody was asking, where's this coming from? And I don't think I have to say that that's very bad publicity for an upcoming artist, so Cortan immediately went into damage control mode by deleting every single one of the comments, leading people to leave even more, and of course, making Jumix look even more guilty. And for one reason or another, he never ended up addressing any of these allegations, he never tried to defend himself, he never came out with any counterclaims, he never talked about Lil Saku, he just wanted it to all go away, and eventually it did. And this is when he ended up changing his name over to Goodnight Mark to try to escape all the allegations that were put on the Jumix name, dropping music under that title on his SoundCloud without the label's help. And if he had kept going in that direction, he probably would have faded away, his popularity would have eventually dwindled and disappeared, but everybody would have forgotten about this one event, never talking about it again. But unfortunately, Jumix couldn't leave it alone, and he decided to retaliate in the worst way possible. And that's when he decided to dox both I Don't Know Conundrum and Sad C-Rod, even though C-Rod didn't really have a whole lot to do with the situation in the first place, basically losing Jumix any goodwill that he might have had and leading Progress to make a second video on him. And at this point, I think Cortan realized that Jumix was a lot more trouble than he was actually worth, and the following years they didn't really drop a whole lot of music with him, didn't put a whole lot of money into him besides dropping a couple singles to close off his deal, and by 2021 he was completely dropped from the label. And as for Saku, well, did she fade away after this point? Of course not. No, she actually ended up getting in with Lil Xan. Now this was kind of a weird time in Lil Xan's career. He was definitely starting to lose quite a bit of relevancy and finding himself in a lot of controversy after breaking up with Noah Cyrus. He ended up getting with this girl going by the name of Annie Compton, with the two of them having a pretty contentious relationship, with Lil Xan cheating on her on several occasions, eventually leading her to fake a pregnancy to try to get him to stick around, only for the truth to come out later after some of Lil Xan's fans looked into it a little bit deeper, realizing that Annie actually used an ultrasound off of Google Images and that the entire pregnancy was completely faked. And of course this made Lil Xan look really bad, with a lot of people online thinking that he orchestrated the entire fake pregnancy to get a little bit more attention, but he would claim in a No Jumper interview that he didn't know it was fake either and only found out when everybody else did, so of course that led to them breaking up. And what do you do after you break up? Well, you need to rebound. And Lil Xan ended up rebounding to the absolute worst option that he ever could have, with him starting to date Lil Saku. That's right, she once again found herself around a big SoundCloud rapper. Now this relationship really didn't last all that long. I think Lil Xan was basically only hooking up with her to try to get over his past relationship, and eventually him and Annie did get back together again, only to break up a second time. But to Lil Saku, this was a really big deal. She was finally dating a famous rapper, there might be a chance that she would be able to get into Xanarchy and really get her rap career off the ground, and she was of course very excited. But even with everything finally going in a good direction for her, she couldn't help herself but talk underage boys, with her allegedly sending nudes to one of Lil Xan's cover artists, of course, leading him to cut her off. And none of this probably would have ever came to light if it wasn't for the fact that Lil Xan really wanted to make a song with Jumix at the time, leading Jumix to retaliate on his story, saying that he wouldn't make a song with Lil Xan as long as he was dating Lil Saku. As well as him finally revealing the fact that Lil Saku had tried to hook up with Sad C-Rod, although he didn't mention her by name, leading her to once again be able to kind of escape the situation, with the main story being that Jumix and Lil Xan were in a beef. With the entire story being talked about on No Jumper, and I really feel like Jumix should have said her name. I know he wasn't trying to give her any more attention or give her any type of weird fame, but by him leaving her name out, Adam had no idea who Jumix was talking about, and she was once again able to slink away with absolutely no ramifications. There was a little bit of talk about it on the lolcow forums, but honestly any well-adjusted person isn't really going to go on there for anything besides research, so once again Lil Saku was able to escape. And at this point you're probably thinking, okay, she already got around 2 famous SoundCloud rappers only to have everything destroyed by her past allegations popping up again. At this point she's definitely going to fade away, live a normal life, and not try to get around anybody else, right? And on top of that, she's basically run out of luck, right? There's no way that she's going to be able to get around a 3rd big SoundCloud rapper, right? Well, unfortunately that's not true, because she actually ended up getting in a music video with Lil Lotus. Now if you guys don't know Lil Lotus, I wouldn't really blame you. I mean, after all, he's nowhere as big as somebody like Lil Xan or Jumix at the height of their career, but he is pretty well known in LA for being part of the emo rap group called Boyfriends. I actually did an entire video on both him as well as that group if you want to check them out. The guy's also a scammer and kind of a piece of shit, but that's besides the point, because it turns out that Lil Lotus was actually pretty attracted to Lil Saku. He wanted her to come out, shoot the music video with her, and if everything went well, the two of them might have actually ended up dating. But unfortunately, there was one factor that led to her end. Saku was able to escape 3 massive situations where she was almost exposed for being a as well as destroying the entire reputation and career of Jumix while not really getting many ramifications for herself. But there was one thing that she could never escape, the thing that was growing off the front of her face. That's right, once she went to the music video shoot, there was absolutely no way that she could facetune her nose to make it look smaller, and once Lil Lotus ended up seeing it, he was immediately turned off. Which, I mean, I kinda get, everybody has their preferences, but I do feel like it's a little bit hypocritical for Lil Lotus to call out anybody else for having a big nose. I mean, come on dude, it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black here. But either way, Lotus was not down to continue a relationship with her. She was able to get in the music video, which was kind of a double-edged sword for her, because of course it got her a lot of attention, but at the same time everybody could see her real nose for everything that it was. And for somebody as vain as her, that probably is the biggest punishment that she could ever receive. Okay, that's not true at all, she definitely should be in prison, but either way, after that, Lil Saku finally faded away. She ended up continuing to work with smaller artists for the coming years. She eventually got into a collective with a guy going by the name of Weather, who she dated for a while, but of course it wasn't long before they broke up as well, and she would continue to stalk him for the following years, eventually leading her reputation to become so bad within even the underground that she couldn't work with anybody, and she finally decided to step away from music once and for all. Which is a good thing, right? She finally went to get help. She's no longer going to be around young boys anymore. If she's not making music, she can't influence anybody to be around her, but unfortunately, she ended up becoming a cosplayer in British Columbia, and she's still doing the same shit. Ever since I made my first couple videos on her, I've had multiple people come out and say that she's still trying to hook up with young boys at cosplayer conventions in British Columbia. Basically everybody knows her and her reputation, but unfortunately a lot of young boys do want to hang out with her because after all they find her pretty. So yeah, after all these years, Lil Saku has still never really gotten in trouble for anything that she's done in the past. I mean, people definitely know about her online, but at this point she's no longer going by the name of Lil Saku, instead going by the name of Ray of Darkness. After those videos came out about her, she ended up changing her Instagram name to something completely different. So basically at this point it's never going to stop. She's going to continue to go into different scenes, get around different people, change her name, and run away from her past, and I don't think she's ever going to face repercussions. It's super sad to see, but after all, she is a woman, and in a lot of situations when it's a woman predator, nobody really cares. A lot of people think, wow, those guys are really lucky to be able to hook up with her, she's so hot, but at the same time, it is still abuse, and it definitely should be called out. And as for Jumix, well, if you want to know anything more about him, then check out the multiple other videos that I did. He's definitely not in a good place either, but is it fully deserved? Well, probably, but at the same time, he's not completely at fault either. So with all that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope I was able to put that story together in a way that made sense, hopefully got all the details correct, but if I did get anything wrong, be sure to tell me in the comments below. Like I said before, I'm only one man. I try my best to get everything correct, but sometimes I can slip up, but I would never intentionally spread misinformation. And with all that said, subscribe to the channel. We are finally back 2025. Shout out to Knife Gang. Leave those knife emojis in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.